Hey gang, welcome back to J Daddy's Garage. Today's video is part 12 in the Mach 1 Cobra Jet rebuild series. Now in the previous video, I showed how I welded on the original shock towers and rear aprons to the new frame rails. I also did a lot of test fitting. I took the torque boxes, put those in place, had the frame rails all in place, and a viewer made a very good comment. The comment related to the torque boxes. And basically what they were saying is the truth, that the torque box upper plate sits on top of the frame rail. And so when I was mocking it up, I was putting that on the bottom side of that frame rail. But I want to show you some things and why that may or may not be a good idea. You know, the original design of the Mustang didn't even have a torque box. Later on they were added in, so it was kind of a secondary thought. The reality is they didn't probably do enough homework whenever they were putting that together. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So here are the new frame rails. And if you'll look at the tabs on that frame rail, they're parallel to each other. In fact, this one may be up just a hair, but they are basically parallel to each other. Consider the idea whenever you put this together. When the frame rail slides into the floor support, the firewall is flat and the tabs on the frame rail are flat. So from what I can tell, when they put these together later on and they added the torque box went right up against the bottom side of the firewall, and then the frame rail went against that, and it created kind of a sandwich effect. Is there any benefit to that? Maybe, maybe not. I look at it like this: if you're making a sandwich and you make your bread and whatever, and you put, let's say, ham and cheese, or do you put cheese and ham? Is the end result any different? Probably not. Let me show you what I'm talking about specifically up here. I'll come up on as high as I can get, and if you look at, I can probably zoom over to that side. There you can see there's the plate and the frame rail. Floor pan is still there, and that plate is between the two, and it's the same thing over here. Same situation. You can see the floor pan, the frame rail. You can see the floor pan up above, and then the plate, and then the frame rail. You can also see there's a gap. So what it does in effect is it pushes the floor pan up to make room for that plate. So now you see what I'm talking about. I don't see any big difference between having one above the other than creating a hump in the floor pan. I would rather have the floor pan and the frame rail flat against each other. The secondary part of that, as I'm building this, if I put in that plate and I put the frame rail in based on my jig, it's going to want to push that frame rail forward a little bit. Is it going to make that much of a difference? Probably not. But I would rather have the frame rail seated where it's supposed to be, and then put the plate up against that flange. You can still weld through those. You can still put holes and weld them, plug them shut, or you can weld on the edge where that plate interacts with the frame rail. So that's my take on that. I'm sure some people want to debate that, but let's move on. Today's video, I want to work on the firewall. As I mentioned before, we're trying to save as many original parts to this car as we can, so we're going to cut off the bottom half of that firewall in order to attach it to the original firewall. So I need to get that back out, do some alignment, do some measuring, maybe a little hammer and dolly work on the original firewall piece, and see if I can't get the two to come together. That is fitting rather nice, honestly. Okay, so we can see what's left of this main firewall. Unfortunately, all this was rusted off, so I'm gonna have to come up with a line and try to transition it down much like I did here, come across, probably in that range, because I don't have much else to work with down there. The thing is, I'm going to be modifying all this again. So I'm going to build this firewall, make it right, but then when it comes time to do the transmission, this tunnel is going to have to be expanded as well. So kind of a double thing here, but there's no way around it at this point. I will also probably weld shut the holes that I had made for the when I drilled off the apron or separated the aprons, and this is all fitting very well up there. Probably come in again right here, just below this transition. All right, so I've taken the firewall out of the body, and there's some things I need to address. I've already started a little bit. There was some high metal from the separation up here that I had to remove and grind down. Also a little bit on the sides here. Well, I just spent probably 10 or 15 minutes talking to myself because the GoPro did not film. What I did is I made some lines and I cut off that bottom edge, so that's all cleaned up. I also took the hammer and dolly and flattened out the flanges, so that looks much better than it did before. And I flattened out the spot weld locations, so I'm going to have to weld these back solid again. The other thing I pointed out, and it didn't pick up in the video, but this mount location here, these were distorted. So I don't know why. This had a hump right here. You can see I took a hammer and knocked this down. Had to reshape these a bit. So I don't know why it was shaped like that, but I fixed that. So at this point, I want to weld these holes shut again, and then we'll start looking at where or how I'm going to cut that panel to make it interact correctly with this panel. At this point, the original firewall fits very well. It follows the transition of the cowl. There's not much, the clamps are just there, but if I take those off, it doesn't really change much. So, very happy with how that looks, especially on this side. As you can see, I did weld up those holes. And now I'm at a bit of a crossroads. The reason for that is the plan is to save the original rocker panels from the old body. Well, if you look at how these are assembled, you have multiple layers, right? So you have the outer rocker, the inner rocker, you have the kick panel, you have the air box, firewall. All these things are layered against each other. So what has to happen, I can't put the firewall in yet anyway, because if I put the firewall in, it'll be welded to that kick panel, and I need to isolate the kick panel off of the dynacorn rocker panels. So we had mentioned these before. These are a one-piece rocker panel, and what I mean by that, there's no overlap right here where you would see that on the original. So there is a series of spot welds down there on that kick panel, let's say, and they are on the inside, or well, the outside, respectively, of the outer rocker panel. So if I try to take and weld in the firewall at this point or do any more work, I can't take that back apart, because now that piece is welded to the firewall and I can't take the sides back off. And these are just sitting here. I'm not ready for these to be attached yet. So I have a bit of a dilemma. I think the plan, because I know I have to take all that apart, cut it up, get those rocker panels out, but I can't just I think you see what I'm getting at here. I can take all that out, but I'm going to have to disassemble everything here and isolate, let's say, the A pillar, the B pillar, the side piece off of that rocker panel. And then I have to get the other rocker panel in and then reset all this stuff. So that's where I'm at. I'm going to have to kind of shift gears here, rearrange the shop, because I have to get that off of the lift and probably onto the body cart that I have. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, I've done some rearranging of the shop. As you can see, the Studebaker is now up on the lift, and I brought the old shell up here on the right front or left front as you're looking out. Now, obviously I've got a lot more cutting to do. The situation is I need to get this or both of these rocker panels out. So if you remember, when I initially started doing this, we thought we were going to be able to put this pan into this body. And as we progressed, we realized that wasn't going to work. So what I had done here is I had attached some square tubing on top of the rockers, and I used it as a mount point for my cross bracing. And that way I would have the interior panel independent. I could take that inner rocker out. So now I have to kind of switch gears. I need to take all of this back off and attach it, let's say, to the inside of the rocker panel or the inner rocker. Now the thing is, I don't know that that's really going to save anything or save anything else with the car. We had talked about using the B pillars from this car. I don't know that I can do that. This there's a hole rusted through here. The whole top piece is gone up here. It's rusted through at the bottom on this side in particular. And overall, I don't know that it's worth it to try to save that particular piece. On the other side, similar situation, but this still has the upper section is in good shape, and you come down here and the whole bottom is gone. Now again, we're trying to pull these rocker panels out. So part of that complexity is the quarter panels are welded to the top face of the rocker panel. So even though we wanted to, or we considered using the bulk of these quarter panels, and we still might do that, I have to sacrifice something, because I can't get in there and take those welds off without damaging that bottom flange. So I may have to cut off the bottom of the quarter panel right there, and we're putting new quarters on anyway, but that's where we're at. So that has to be cut apart. Same way here, we've got welds going into the B pillar, and also up front here we have the A pillar that has welds on it. Now the A pillar on this is completely scrap. Nothing will be salvaged from there. I don't plan to cut off the forward section of these rockers because I have new pieces to go in. So all of this can come apart. But I have to do a lot more reconfiguring, let's say. I know that some people are, have some controversy with how I'm doing this, but ultimately it's up to the owner as to what pieces he wants saved. And if it means dissecting this out and getting these rocker panels out, well, that's what I'm going to do. So it's just going to take some time here to slice and dissect and get everything rearranged. So probably A lot of this will be in a time-lapse format. I don't know if I'll have the GoPro on as much, but just giving you a heads up as to where we're at on the process. So the first thing I need to do, I think, is remove that piece of square tubing and then rearrange how all this is interacting with each other. I would like to try to keep as much of the structure in where it is, but if it comes to it, I may just have to start cutting stuff off and getting rid of it, because what's left here is very little of what we're going to actually be able to keep. Along with that, I want to show you some things. I took some measurements from dedicated, well, I say dedicated spots. This is rusted out, but that side was still there. And I did some cross measuring from different places to get some numbers. I also did some measuring in the back here, crisscrossed, to make sure everything is square. And what I did is I recorded those measurements here on the new panels. So I know that from here to a location over there that I picked out, it's 16.3/4, and I think that area, yeah, I identified it right there. So crisscross there. Also a width measurement, 55 inches from inside of this kick panel to that side in the kick panel. I did a measurement from that corner, I don't know how well you can see where I'm pointing, that corner of the third hole up to the corner here, and it's 60.5, and that is consistent. All that is consistent. So the other thing I measured was, I have written it down, but the door opening from this location where the light switch is, basically to the striker. So I have that dimension written down. So I've taken a bunch of notes on all this. The reason for that, well, when it comes to putting this back together, everything has to interact. And I will be separating, of course, these rocker panels out. So that means this piece, the A pillar and the B pillar, will be kind of in free space. So I may actually put a piece of metal between those two to make sure they don't move. So it's a little bit complicated, but I am going to try to film what I can, just so you know. Time to cut things apart. I think I've come to a decision. You know, I was trying to be very careful, I guess, in separating pieces and parts in an effort to get behind where the welds are and drill all that out, and I realized I'm wasting time because we're not saving really anything else at this point. So I've cut away, which I needed the access, but I cut away the bottom of the A-pillar, got rid of the extra pieces, and I left this piece here simply because that is a reference point. I can use that as a measurement later on. And in the back, I made a decision that I'm not going to save this B-pillar. Top was missing. I found this hole, but inside the inner structure is all rusted. And it would be too much work to try to save all that. And the bottom had a hole in it, so I'm not going to use that. it makes sense to keep these in place so that we're not having to separate and try to refit and adjust. And you know, I think we're better off keeping this together. So at this point, for sure, I'm not using this one, and there may be a chance I can save that one, but I don't know yet. So I did cut off the bottom of the quarter as I needed to get access to the welds here where the flange is. So everything is cut off. Now, again, I was thinking I'm going to drill all these holes out and, you know, make a big effort to save some stuff. But the reality is I'm not gaining anything. All of this is going away. So I've decided I'm just going to take the plasma cutter and cut this off right here. And then this is already gone. So I'll cut off the seat pan, the rest of the floor pan, cut through the torque box, and then just cut it off right there. And what that'll do is it'll allow me to take the whole rocker panel assembly, both halves, and get them out of there. Then I can take it and put it on my little bench, clamp it down or whatever, and I can either drill or grind off the back side of the welds on the inner rocker panel and leave me with basically the intact outer rocker panel. So that's the plan. Keep cutting, keep making little pieces. One little piece hanging on. I know as soon as I cut this it'll fall. I win. Oh gosh. Look at all that rust. Man. Whew. Well, my bracing is doing what it's supposed to do, I guess. Keeping it mostly together. But wow. Okay. That's going to take some grinding to get all of those spot welds off, but it's going to be a lot easier to do it on my little table than it would be to do it on what's left of this car. So, yep. So here's where we're at. I've been grinding off these welds and separating everything to get the inner rocker panel out away from the outer rocker panel. So just to show you how some of that goes. And the reason I'm doing it this way, a couple of reasons. I would rather sacrifice the inner rocker and save the outer intact. And then when it comes time to weld things together, I can weld the new inner rocker to the old outer, and the spot welds that were visible will still be visible. It'll still look like there were the original spot welds. So I know it's a little maybe a small detail, but I'm trying to do what I can to make everything look kind of correct. So let's keep separating things. There's a spot weld right on the edge. They kind of were all over the place. So you had, you know, fairly consistent pattern. Then they got doubled up, doubled up, and then separated again. So, you know, these were all freehand. There was no pattern that they were following specifically. Yep, see, there's another one. Doubled up. If you notice, there's only like 2 spot welds back here in this back section. See that? No spot weld back there on that edge at all. Nothing. All right, there it is. No, look at that. I don't know what that says. It's like a reverse print or something. That's interesting. Little bit of sealer down there, and really that's about it. So, you know, of course, these are galvanized, so the inside should be pretty good. Obviously, I have to take off this inner piece yet here, which is part of the outer wheelhouse, and of course, all this has to get ground off. Of course, now, as I look at this, got to realize too that this piece has to come out. That is the forward section of the rocker panel. That's what's left of it here, so you can see there's the overlap. So I'll have to get those welds out as well. But yeah, not bad. Takes a few hours. Cut all this apart, and they're still, you know, got to hammer and dolly and straighten things up, get this area free of rust and that area free of rust. But it's saved. Also, I'll point out, can't really see it very well, right there's the numbers on the bottom. There's a set of numbers there, a 65, and looks like a, I don't know, Z7 or something. So there it is. Okay, so let's have a look at where we're at right now. Having removed the outer rocker panel, I can say that the inside is really in decent shape. There is some rust back there, but that is from the overlap of the wheelhouse and not that critical. It can be cleaned up and treated and it'll be okay. The rest of it, you know, as you know, this is galvanized, and so this is really durable over the life of the sheet metal. But it has a little bit of rust in here and just a few little spots up here in the front. That's pretty minor overall for the inside of this. Also point out there is, you can see the stamping of the sheet metal company or whatever they used. National Steel, and I don't know what it says there, WE something. Can't read it all. That's kind of neat to see that stamping in there. Now, I've already cleaned up some of these welds and removed the inner structure here, of course, of what was left of the forward piece of the rocker panel. As you can see, this is also galvanized. It did have some numbers stamped in here, 130, that's a 2, so I don't know what exactly that means, if anything, but obviously we can't use any of that. So what we have is some Spectra parts. Now, normally I don't care for Spectra because to me they don't do, well, they do a decent job of making the part, but this thing is stamped out in a big press and then it's just cut off with a plasma cutter. So in most cases you're left to trim it to what you need, which is fine. This edge back here, which isn't critical, but it's just, you can see it's not stamped very well. But overall, this matches basically the shape of the forward rocker as it should. So if we look at this, when I first saw these, I thought, oh no, it's bent. Well, it's not bent. It's shaped to match the inside of the outer rocker. So this fits actually pretty well. The important thing is to get this length correct. And there can be some variables. You could see where you could easily kind of push this back and forth, maybe a 1/4 inch or 3/8. So you want to make sure that you get those measurements right when you put that on. If we look at it from the other side, so if we put it inside and look at it, you can see these weld holes line up pretty good. You can see these pretty well. You can see the bit of overlap down here, length being a little bit long, and it almost looks like right there's the stamping. There's a joggle, let's say, from where they put the other piece on the inside. That's lines up pretty close to that, but it leaves a gap up here. Now this isn't that critical. The important part is to get this length all right, because you have to get the nut in the right location for the fender. So normally when I do this stuff, I tell people work on one side at a time. As in, if you're putting in whatever, quarter panel, wheelhouses, work on one side at a time so you have a reference to the other side. So my plan right now is I could cut out the driver's side, make all that ready to go, but I don't want to do that just now. I want to use that as a solid reference for this. Along with that, what I want to do is reinforce this side, because when I take this off and I separate it from the rocker panel, I'm going to have nothing but this little piece of metal here, and this could easily be manipulated and moved, right? So I'm going to take a piece of 1-inch square tubing and I'm going to weld it to the inside of the A-pillar, this contact area of the B-pillar, and also the roof structure piece there, the inner structure. It makes free contact. I'm not changing any dimensions. It all lines up together, and that'll hold these three pieces, hopefully in the right dimension. Along with that, what I have done is I've taken measurements. So the forward edge of this flange for the B-pillar, 58 7/8, come forward, and I clamped a piece of wood right here so that I can take the tape measure right up against the face of this and get that measurement. Same way here, I hooked on 20 3/8, and that verifies that to this face as well. So that's going to keep everything in plane with each other, and the square tubing should keep everything from flexing. So that'll be the next step. Get this welded on, get this off, and start taking this apart. Here we go. All right, so the side is off, and what I decided to do was add another piece of square tubing. I was comfortable with that top section, but the more I thought about it, I was like, well, let's be safe. Add another piece here, and that way there's nothing that can change dimensionally at the bottom. So as I look at this, I want to show you a couple things. Here we have a spot weld on the edge. There's a little spot weld there, there, and then there's nothing on the inside of this and all the way back. And the reason for that is the A-pillar is overlapping the outside. So they put this on, this was probably built first and then attached to this, so that's why there's no spot welds here. I will probably drill some holes, maybe on the new or the original piece if they're not already there, and weld those together just to make it a little more solid. Here we have spot welds on these edges. That's it in this section right here, and of course this is nothing back here because there's nothing attached, but that's what we have on the inside of this. And then of course on the other side there will be welds that hold the B-pillar to the rocker panel. One thing I want to point out that I found interesting as I was looking this over, of course, you know, they try to make all these pieces as universal as they can. So I don't know specifically if there's a difference between the 68, 69, 70, you know, rocker panels. However, you'll note that these have the holes for a coupe, because you would have your, there's a plate that goes on the inside and the bottom for the inner panel that supports the inner structure around the rear window. So, you know, these are universal, whereas these, if I'm looking at the rear section right here, there's no holes. There's no nut plates. So just an observation, you know, so when they made these rocker panels were specific to the fastbacks because they did not have a rear window that opened or went up and down. So just one of those things. But I'm going to probably do a time lapse on this, taking this apart, and basically just have to drill out these welds and then break these loose back here, flip it over, and get the other side loose. here we have these little dimples. So I'm assuming those must be some sort of spot weld as well. So I'm going to just try to get the top of those off. I really don't want to drill all the way through the rocker panel. I did that earlier up here. It's a little bit hard to get through it, but we'll find out if I have to. Okay. Now, if we can gently get things to come apart. Nice to hear that little pop pop. Now all those welds are broken on top now, so might just be a little bit hanging on in the back. There's that one. Okay, so I can see the rings on those, so I know those are actually separated. I don't know if I can get that in there. Oh, there, that popped. Haha. Very good. Little tiny one holding on. Now, is there one hidden? I see a spot weld there. Yep, there's a hidden one. So spot weld there. See if I can get into it with the drill. That might have weakened it enough. missed one up here. There it is. Ta-da! All right. Yeah, see, those were the welds I was seeing out here. They were doubled up. So now we have a good rocker panel, I guess. Maybe a good spare rocker panel, I should say. So I'm going to do a bit of a comparison between this one and the original. Okay, I know everybody talks about these rocker panels from Dynacorn, and I want to say what I can see, they look pretty accurate, at least from what I see. So if you look, like, here's the notches, those are in the right location. This notch, this corner, seems to match this corner back here, because this is where the overlap is. This piece doesn't count. Moving back, I see some differences here. We have this hole is the same in similar location. It doesn't have this hole, which it should be there. It has that hole, which is not here. So again, there's probably a variance between the fastback version and the coupe version that they use. Looking at the back section here, this has a notch, but it's a really rough shape, so there's no notch matching that. There is an indentation, or let's say a little bit humped area here. That is here, but it's forward. And then these are different. These little humps that they have on the bottom here is like a recess. This is pushed out. It has that on this one, but when you go back and forth, there's definitely differences between the two of them. Now, this is one that always gets a lot of questions. So just to show you, if I lay this in that corner, that's about 1 3/4 inches. That is 1 3/4 inches. So this gap appears to be correct. If I go to this one, and it's hard to measure this, I'm going to go, because this flange is a little bit bent from disassembly, but here's a good section right here. So if I go from, hopefully you can see this, from the outside of this flange to the hump, it's just 1 5/16 to the corner of that hump. So 1 5/16. This one, lo and behold, that's 1 5/16 as well. So I know that there's been a lot of problems with the rocker panels that people get. They say they're too wide. This one looks to be the right width. Now I'm gonna have to eyeball this. I can't do a direct measurement, and this is about 4 3/8. Again, that's just kind of eyeballing it. That's from the inside of this flange to what I can see is the outside of this. And that's within range, let's say, depending on how you look at it. I'm trying to keep the tape flat on this surface and try to be as square as I can, and that's 4 3/8. So at this point, at least this rocker panel that came with the full side is the same dimension as this rocker panel, the original one. So unfortunately, I know a lot of people have had to take and cut the rocker panel and narrow it. I don't know if there's different manufacturers out there, but again, this one feels like it's correct. Now, what I'm going to have to do, I don't want to cut this up at all. I want to leave this intact. So if I need to make some repairs on this piece, you know, if I have to do something here, I'm going to make that piece rather than cut up that one. I'd rather keep this solid. Because in the end, if I get I'm going to work with the owner. If I get a hold of another 69 that I want to build, and it has bad rockers, well, then maybe I can work out a deal on these. There's really nothing to this. This is just a flat surface overall. A little bit of hand shaping can make that work, and that'll be easy enough. Back here, I know that I have had to deal with this before on other cars. This one appears like it's solid enough, but if it's not, I can hand make that piece and blend it right in, and it'll look good. So, yeah, overall, it looks like a decent rocker panel. Well, I think that'll be the end of this video. I went through a lot of work to get the rocker panel out of the original car, and of course stripping off the inner rocker panel, exposing the metal, finding a little bit of rust to deal with. I need to take care of all of that, sanding or grinding out the rust, treating the metal, getting paints and primers in there. I may need to do a little bit of welding in a few spots to make sure everything is nice and in good condition. And I don't want to rush any of that, and I know it's going to take too long in this video for me to film all that and be able to put the video out. Now I also want to make sure that everything is ready otherwise, like I have to do maybe some grinding on the welds that I broke loose on the A pillar and B pillar. So there's just a lot more that has to happen. But I'm going to make another video, probably showcasing the assembly work and all that sort of thing, and trying to fit things back together. So that'll be it. I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank my patrons who continue to support me and help me keep this channel going and keep all this stuff in the shop, keep the lights on, all those sort of things. They are a tremendous help, and I appreciate them very much. If you're interested in becoming a patron, there are links in the description below. Also, tools that I use in the shop, there are links in the description below. So if you use that, you will get a discount, and I may get a little percentage of that as well. If you like these videos, you can also tip. There is a little tip function at the bottom of the screen. Hey, if it helps you out and you want to help me out, throw a tip my way. Why not? Helps us all. So again, thanks for watching, and until next time, take care of yourself. See ya.